Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I was less than a year old when I had this experience in 1965. I was sitting on the floor in front of the couch in the living room. My parents were somewhere in the house, but I didn't know where. I was by myself. I chose to crawl around. I crawled over and around the couch to the left side, and when I got to the back left corner, I noticed there was plenty of space for me to crawl between the back of the couch and the wall. I crept behind the couch's center. The material beneath the couch had been ripped open at the seam. The gap was large enough for me to crawl through. Cool. A secret place where I can hang out and my parents will never know, I remember thinking. I began crawling in until I realized it was quite crowded due to the insulation or something above me. I rolled onto my stomach, grabbed the material beneath my hands, and drew myself in even more. I did this several times until I was well inside the right side of the couch. Then I noticed a major issue. I was running out of oxygen and breathing was becoming increasingly difficult. I need to get out of here so I can get some fresh air, I reasoned. Because it was so small, I couldn't figure out how to back up and turn around. I struggled and struggled until it became clear that I was going nowhere. I needed more oxygen because of the struggle. Soon, there was almost no oxygen, leaving me too weak to fight. I gave up and started suffocating. I'm not sure if there are words to describe the agony of suffocation. It was horrible until I suddenly felt acceptance. Although the suffering was excruciating, I found solace in my acceptance. The pain began to fade quickly until there was none left. It was such a relief to realize that what was causing me to suffer was no longer necessary. I no longer required Earth's oxygen and was no longer confined to my physical body, but I was completely coherent. I never fell asleep or became unconscious during the entire process. I never vanished and I felt fantastic, far better than any human could feel in the flesh on Earth. Why should I stay here? I reasoned. I shifted slightly to my right and turned what would now be my spiritual head to the right. Suddenly, everything became clear. Although I could see the living room, it appeared as if I was no longer on the couch. I looked around and saw that the floors, walls, furniture, and objects were all in perfect condition. The room was extremely bright, as if illuminated by 100 light bulbs. I decided to climb higher to get a better look around. I could see that I was standing above the couch. I noticed that I was only interested in what was in front of me and to the right of me. This is due to the fact that I never turned my body, only my head. When I looked to the left, all I saw was a wall of darkness a short distance away and beyond me. I didn't want anything to do with it, so I concentrated on other things. Then, all of a sudden, everything changed. Flowers began to sprout from everywhere. The floors, walls, and objects were all intact, but there were flowers growing out of every square inch of everything, transforming the room into a small little paradise. It was stunning. This level of happiness was unlike anything you could ever feel in the flesh on Earth. For example, suppose you won 200 million in the lottery. That must make a person happy, right? But that happiness would barely scratch the surface of the happiness I was experiencing. You have no sense of time. You only get a sense of eternity all the time. I'm not sure what this is or what's going on, but I'm loving it, I thought. Then, with the flip of a switch, it was pitch black. What happened? I wondered. I had wondered if one of my parents had turned off the lights, but I knew it could be because it was daytime and there was no light coming in through the windows or anything. It was complete darkness, which was diametrically opposed to the feeling I had in the little paradise. I still didn't have a sense of time, only eternity. I became concerned and wondered. That's all there is to it. I'm stuck in this darkness by myself for the rest of my life. It was depressing me. Then I heard voices from behind me and over my left shoulder. At first, I was relieved because I realized I wasn't alone after all. Then I realized the voices were coming from people or other suffering beings, and they weren't just in pain. They sounded both evil and sinister. It's difficult to describe the sounds, but I was becoming increasingly terrified. I just wanted to get away. I had no sense of direction because there was only one destination. I reasoned that if I returned to my other body and stayed with it, I could return to where I came from and escape this horrible place. That's exactly what I did. I'm not sure how I did it, but I was able to sense the location of my physical body and maintain it in an upright position. I thought this was the best I could do to get away from the horror, but the voices became louder and closer. They could still be heard over my left shoulder. They got closer and closer until they encircled me. My plan wasn't working, and there was no way out. The only thing that came to mind was to seek assistance. I had the impression that someone could hear and assist me, but I didn't want to yell for assistance because I didn't want these evil things to hear me. I closed my eyes and said softly, "Someone, please help me," in hushed tones. The voices around me abruptly stopped, and I opened my eyes, thinking, "Oh no, they heard me." And did they leave, or are they just going silent? I was still terrified because I didn't know which. Then, out of nowhere, a light shone from behind me. I was too scared to move or turn to see what was going on. The light became brighter until I felt a hand touch my left shoulder. I was surprised at first because I assumed it was one of those evil beings after all. When I turned to the right, I noticed a man dressed entirely in white. I was afraid of him at first until I noticed he was holding me gently, comforting me, and quickly telling me who he was. He told me in a spiritual language that I completely understood, and now that I'm human on earth, I can kind of tell you what he said in English. "I'm Jesus, your Savior, Savior of all mankind, and today I'm taking you with me to paradise," he said. I was relieved to see him. I knew then that there would be nothing else to fear and that our destination would be spectacular. We began to move forward, and at first it appeared that we were floating. Jesus was still holding me against his left side, comforting and conversing with me. We moved only for a few steps before I noticed a crowd of hundreds, if not thousands, of lights approaching. Each light featured a human figure, but no facial or body features, only figures that appeared to be human shadows with a very bright light in the center of each one. Except for Jesus and the people, everything was pitch black. Jesus and the people had their differences. The people were dark shadows with lights and no distinguishing features. Jesus was completely transparent, but you could see his features. His face and long hair resembled those seen in photographs taken on Earth. To put it another way, when you leave this world and meet Jesus, you'll see him as he's remembered on Earth. We were approaching the people with lights, and as we got closer, we veered to the left to pass them on our right side. Then I noticed it was getting lighter, as if there was a sunrise. Instead of floating, we were now walking. Walking appeared to be as natural, if not more so, than it is in the physical body. People would gather behind us and follow us as we passed. It was getting lighter by the minute. The more daylight there was, the less I could see the people's lights and the more I could see their faces. We kept walking as Jesus and I talked to each other. I'm not sure what we were talking about. I recall Jesus telling me about going to a wonderful place. I remember Jesus and I laughing at one point, not at anyone or anything in particular. It was just pure happy laughter. I was having the most incredible happiness, far beyond my wildest dreams. I was on my way home with my absolute true soulmates. In an instant, Jesus was directly in front of me, staring at me. We came to a halt. He stated, "Everything has changed. You have to return." "What do you mean I have to go back?" I asked. "You must return to your other body and live in the world," Jesus said. I confronted him by saying, "No way. I'm not returning. I'd like to proceed. I'd like to go to heaven. No way am I going back there. I began pleading with tears. Please, don't make me go back there. Please, Jesus said loudly, stopping me. Then Jesus began to explain why I had to return. I don't recall much of what he said. However, I recall him telling me that my mother and father would miss me. They needed me and would be devastated if I left. I also recall him telling me that I needed to make a life for myself on this planet. He explained a lot of other things that I couldn't remember, but I realized I needed to go back. I was floating backward while he was floating forward, facing me. Everyone else gathered behind Jesus and was staring at me, seeing me back. Is there anything else you'd like to ask before you go? Jesus asked as we returned to where I would go to the other world. Will I get to go to heaven the next time I come back? Was the only question that came to mind. He replied, No. Why not? I worriedly inquired. I'll show you, he said. I'm not sure how he did it, but he was able to flash my life in front of my eyes. I was able to see my entire life, or at least a large portion of it that I had not yet lived. If you asked me what I saw, I'd say I'm not sure. I knew what I was seeing at the time, but I don't remember being in the flesh. I only remember him showing me that my life had not yet begun. I could use it to my advantage and try to change my history, but I wouldn't be living my life fully. While I was watching, Jesus pointed out things and explained why I couldn't go to heaven the next time, but he also made me realize that I would be in a happy place. In other words, I didn't have to worry about going to hell, and I was perfectly content with returning to earth. The next thing I know, I'm suffocating in my physical body. A hand grabbed my left ankle and yanked me off of the couch. I was jolted to my feet. It was my father. He hugged me and expressed gratitude to God. I reached out to my mother, who hugged me and said nearly the same things as my father. I was overjoyed to be back with them.